we go. We're live. Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, Mom.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. So it's January 4th, to be specific. And we haven't been as active with the podcast, but we're going to get back into the swing of things.
Definitely.
And today, tell us what we are thinking about doing today.
Well, we were going to do a little recap of our 2024 reading year, including our top 10 best books that we read, and also a few statistics on how many 5-star ratings did we give? Did we read books in print? Did we listen to audiobooks? Anyway, we're just going to have a little chat about how our reading year went and if we have any plans to make changes for the future.
I felt like overall I had a really good reading year. When I was looking through my Goodreads at all of the books that I had finished, it was hard to pick 3 of my favorites because I know that we wanted to kind of we're not going to go over in great depth, but we'll just list our favorites for the year. And I have a lot of contenders, so it was difficult. What about you?
Well, that's interesting. I read 126 books during 2024. And of those, I rated 20 of them 5 stars. So that's a lot. But you know what was interesting? It wasn't that hard to come up with my 10 favorites because a lot of the books that I rated 5 stars were books that were exactly the right book for me at the time. I mean, it fit my mood. It just, it was just what I felt like then. But a lot of those haven't stuck with me long term. So it was easy to pick the 10 books that really left a lasting impact on me. And that was kind of my criteria for narrowing it down to the top 10. And in terms of statistics, I had 13 DNF books. That means I did not finish them. I counted them as a book that I read if I completed 50% of it. If I just got, 30 pages into it and it decided it wasn't for me, that did not make my list at all as books that I read. But 13 books I got at least halfway through and thought, this is a complete waste of my time. I'm not having fun. And that's higher than usual. I think I'm getting a little bit looser with my thinking I have to finish a book. And if it's not going great, I'll abandon it midship. And
how many books did you read again?
126.
Jeez. Okay.
And I read 60 of those books were actual hard copy in print books, which surprised me because I would have predicted that most of my books were on Kindle, but it was pretty close. 56 of them were Kindle and 60 were print, and the rest were audiobooks.
Okay.
And an interesting statistic is that 66 of my 2024 books were published in 2024.
Yeah.
22 books were published in 2023. So clearly I am on the, if it's new and shiny, I'm going to read it bandwagon. I did reread a couple of books that I loved, and I don't reread books all that often. So
I never read books. Yeah.
Rereading 2 books was unusual for me. And interestingly enough, they were 5 stars when I read them originally and 5 stars when I read them again. So,
did you discover any new authors that you are like now going to always, we need a better word for it, but like the authors that you will just, no matter what they publish, you will buy it?
It's called auto-buy authors.
Auto-buy authors. Yeah. Did you have any new ones?
Yes. An author named Janice Hallett. One of her books did make it into my top 10. She has a really unusual writing style that I'll talk more about when we get to our top 10.
Okay.
But she's not a debut author. Let's there's a difference. She's a new to me author. She's got a backlist. that has, I mean, she's very popular, and I was just a little bit late on the bandwagon to discover her, but new to me, yes, and I will buy her books going forward.
I read 52 books. I know you have more stats to share, but just as a comparison.
No, actually, that's it for my stats.
Okay. So you read 126 books. I read 52. So there you go. And I found.
Well, let's just jump in and say you work full time. I'm retired. Yeah. I'm at home, and you know I can read twice as much as you because I don't have. You've got 3 times the responsibilities that I do, so don't call yourself short on that.
I did reach my challenge of reading. My challenge for the year was like, just I want to at least read a minimum of 50 books, and I hit that in October. And then fall was difficult mentally, I guess, for me, and so I have not been reading at the same pace as usual. So, but I wanted to mention that I did find a new auto-buy author for me. Actually, I guess I have 2. The first being, who is it? Wait. Oh no, I forgot who it was. Hang on a second. Oh, right. Robin Sloan is, Robin's a man. So Robin Sloan, I really enjoyed his books. I read 2 of his this year. And there was one more. Well, shoot, I'll come back to that. I also realized that, like Catherine Steadman for me, of course, is an auto-buy. So I love everything she does.
I buy her books when I hate them.
Same, right? And the ones that I hate, I love to hate them. So
same.
And then, of course, my new friend, Andrew D. Young, I'm a big fan of his now, and he writes domestic thrillers. And so, of course, anytime he writes something, I will buy it because I do love his writing. Now, I also read a lot of debut authors, and you and I both discovered Sarah Beth Durst, who wrote The Spell Shop. You know, it's kind of a cozy or romantasy series, and she's got a prequel coming out soon. So that's an auto buy. And I think also Josh Malerman, who wrote one of the favorite books that I'll talk about today, who's a horror author. I'm now discovering him, and he is not a new author, but new to me, and I will auto buy everything. So, yeah. I don't have stats about whether I read mostly Kindle or hardback. I know that I mostly read hardback. In reviewing my books, I thought that perhaps I was light on historical fiction, but that's not true. 20% of the books that I read were historical fiction. But I feel like you take the cake on that. I would say more than 50% of the books you read are historical fiction.
Probably so. Although I'm getting into some other genres that I'm really, really digging.
That's good. So yeah, why don't we dive into our favorites?
All right, first. You go first.
Favorites for the year of 2024.
All right, I'm going in reverse order. This my number 10 spot, and this is the genre that I am really finding that I get a lot more enjoyment out of than I ever realized I could have. That is, loosely it would be called romance, but it's more specifically rom-com, kind of the When Harry Met Sally kind of style of book. And there are 3 authors that really stand out to me: Emily Henry, Catherine Center, and Abby Jimenez. And I really love the style of all 3 of those authors. They're quite prolific. It seems like every spring or early summer they come out with a new book. Yeah. And 2 of them made my number 10 spot. The first one is The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. And it was delightful. It, the thing about rom-coms is you pretty much know where the book is going, from the get-go. But, they're entertaining and comforting and life-affirming. And I just really thoroughly enjoy this genre. So that being said, The Rom-Commers was a book about two screenwriters with vastly different styles who are thrown together to finish a project. And that rom-coms often have tropes, and that this trope was the couple that will become romantically involved absolutely hates each other at first. And then throughout the story, they become closer. And sure enough, that, you know, it's the haters to lovers trope. The second book that I loved in that category was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. And this is the fake dating trope where the guy and the girl think they're cursed to have their any relationship they have is ruined and ends before it gets off the ground. And so they start fake dating just to try to prove to their friends that they can have a relationship that lasts. And sure enough, they fall in love and the relationship lasts. And it was hilarious. And anyway, two really lighthearted, fun, entertaining books that just hit the spot for me this summer.
If you could pick a theme for the year, what was your reading theme? I mean, just not what you chose, but just subconsciously, when we look at all of the books that you've read, is there a theme? Was there a theme that you were leaning into, like light and fluffy, or?
I'm a kind of a broad reader. I like my literary fiction. I like my mysteries. I like my historical fiction, and those are definitely represented in my top 10. Mm-hmm. But it's heavy on the rom-com.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely a trend this year, and I have to say I enjoyed every moment of it.
You did read some good ones. Also, that the one about the dude who was a baseball player, and then...
he's on my list. He wasn't a baseball player. He was a country western singer.
Right. Okay. Baseball, whatever.
I'll get to that one. Yeah.
Okay.
I've got technically I've got 3 out of my 10 top 10 books are rom-coms. So there you go.
So that was one. Say the author again.
The Rom-Commers by Katherine Center and Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Both those books were published this year.
Okay. Now, and your third, do you want to talk about your third?
Oh, I had a third author, but her book didn't make my top 10. I like Emily Henry very much. She wrote, she's written a lot of books. You help me out here. The Beach. Yeah. Was that one of them? Wasn't it called
Emily Henry? Beach Read, Funny Story, Book Lovers. Yeah, Beach Read was great. Yeah. That was from 2020.
Right.
I also read People We Meet on Vacation, and that was terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't my favorite. I enjoyed it though. I did.
Do you want to share other books that you enjoyed?
Well, how do you have a top 10, or are you going to?
I have 3 that I chose.
Oh, if you have 3, well, I've got 10, so I'll do a couple at a time.
Okay, go for it.
Number 9 was it was a duology, Ruthless, Vows, and Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. Divine Rivals was the first book, and Ruthless Vows was the second in the series.
And that was historical fiction, but fantasy a little too.
It was a really interesting format, and it was actually young adult fantasy, which
you never do.
That I never do.
Genre.
I avoid them. But the books are about 2 young people who find love through a magical connection during a time when the gods that oversee their world are at war. And the books, I would say, are a tribute to mythology, the power of love, and the human capacity to do good. So the themes were redeeming. The romance was, of course, not spicy. It was just sweet, the way these 2 people come together. And again, they start out as rivals working for a newspaper, and they become closer through this magical connection that they discover they have.
Okay.
So my number 8 spot is The Hunter by Tana French. She is an auto-buy author for me, for sure.
She's Irish, right?
She's an Irish author, and her books are usually Irish crime fiction. And she's written 2 books about the same main character, whose name is Cal Hooper. And Cal Hooper is a retired cop from the United States who has emigrated to Ireland and bought a kind of a shack out in the countryside.
Kind of a recluse, yeah.
And he thinks he's going to be a recluse, but he keeps drawing people that become close to him into his life. And so and while he's solving some kind of a mystery or situation that's going on, that is the main thrust of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
But the atmosphere of her books are just great. And I hope she continues to write more books that feature this Cal Hooper, because he and the people that are becoming important to him in his life are really compelling and interesting.
Nice. Okay.
All right, your turn.
All right. So, well, this makes it a little easier because I only picked 3, but I have more. Okay. But it was hard to pick just 3. So I'm going to start with, of course, we have to have our Japanese fiction here. So The Miracles of the Namiya General Store by Keigo Higashino is very, very popular in Japan. And this was the one, it's not a little, there's some magical realism happening here where these 3 thieves are hiding out, they're burglars, they're hiding out, and they find this abandoned, just like general store in the middle of the night, and they sneak in. They're trying to hide from the cops and just lay low. But what they realize is they get stuck in like a time loop where the night just doesn't end unless the back door is open.
Like Groundhog's Day, only at night.
Sort of. And then they find that they're getting letters through the front mailbox, the front door, from people in the community asking for advice. Who, the original owner of the general store was this kindly old man who would do this anonymously for people. And of course, this man died about 40 years ago. And so the entire book is basically like this wrinkle in time where the community 40 years ago is able to communicate with the people inside present day in the general store. There's also this fascinating loop of so the book is comprised of like a couple of little mini stories, and all of these characters are wildly different, and yet their lives are interconnected as we find out. And it was a book that I read, of course, on a plane. And we know that when I'm on a plane and traveling, I tend to be tired and emotional. I cried every single chapter of this book at the end of each chapter because it was these nice, wholesome stories. And I just boo-hoo-hooed all the way across to the East Coast. So highly recommend.
I've got this on my list on Amazon, and I keep waiting for it to go on sale in any format. And I've also checked Pango to see if anybody's selling a used copy, and I've just not had any luck.
You bought me a paperback.
I don't want to pay full price.
You bought me the paperback. You can just borrow mine.
Oh, okay.
I have a physical copy of it.
All right, there's that.
I'll give it to you. All right. So that was, I love my Japanese fiction. All right. Next, though, this one, I'm going to say I would have never picked up in a million years, except that you suggested that I read it. And I got it from the Book of the Month company. Margo's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe. And this is a crazy book about this poor young lady who gets knocked up by her community college teacher.
Right.
Gets pregnant, keeps the baby. Her father is this, like, I always kind of pictured him as like Dog the Bounty Hunter, but he's like a retired pro wrestler who is her dad. And it's just this lovely cast of characters, except that the genre and the theme of the book is about how this young lady is making money off of OnlyFans, which is a site used for various I won't say nefarious, but used for various things.
But the thing I loved about that is that she's young. She's like 20. She's really young. And she's got this baby that she's determined to be responsible for. And she's finding that it's really hard. She can't keep her job as a waitress because it's at night.
Can't get a babysitter.
You can't get a babysitter at night. And she's just finding that it's a real struggle. And she discovers that this OnlyFans thing is a way that you can, it's very lucrative. Very lucrative, and she can make a lot of money. And the thing that I also loved, I don't mean to take over you. I'm taking over. But her father, the pro wrestler.
He was great.
He was, pro wrestling, it's all about fakery and creating an image and promoting your persona. And he's brilliant at giving her ideas on how she can do that effectively on her OnlyFans format.
And he's got a drug issue, and so there's a lot of chaos and tension in this book. It's still really funny. I absolutely loved it. I am just so shocked because I just thought this was going to be kind of a yucky topic, but it was not.
It would be tasteless, but somehow you root for all of the characters.
Every single one is flawed, and you love all of them.
Yep.
Except maybe the guy, the teacher. I didn't like the baby daddy. I didn't like him. He's kind of the bad guy anyway.
But I agree with you. That was a really, really well done book.
So good.
She wrote something else too about women who are wrestlers. She has one book that she wrote before Margo's Got Money Troubles. And
the Knockout Queen.
The Knockout Queen. And that got great reviews. That was her debut book, I think.
Yeah, I didn't read that. I'd like to, I guess. Anyway, so that was my second book of the year. And then, of course, my third favorite was Incidents Around the House, which I've already talked ad nauseum about. This was the horror novel that was written by Josh Malerman, and it is from the point of view of an 8-year-old girl. And there is also no quotations used in this book. And so the narration is a little bit up to your best judgment as to who is talking, or is this an idea or a thought, or is this being actually said? I can see I usually hate this. I do not like it. I feel like I think I'm too old to understand why authors use this, and it's like a trend, and it's just trying to be artsy fartsy. But in this case, it 100% added to the effect of the story and the narration. And it was creepy, not bloody, not gory, but creepy with a capital C. And we know I love my creepy books. So yeah, highly recommend that one. So yeah, those are 3 for me. Your turn.
Well, I've got a few more.
I can find more. I'll find some more after you take a turn.
All right. So number 7 is The Appeal by Janice Hallett, and that was the new auto-buy author new to me author. And the reason I like her work so much is she uses a really unusual format. I think Janice Hallett is the first author to use the multimedia technique to tell a story.
Yes.
Emails, text messages between people, letters, newspaper clippings.
Yeah.
Really, really unusual. I mean, now more and more people are doing it, so it's not going to be that unusual. But she was the first that I am aware of to do that. The basis of this particular story is there's a murder amongst a group of theater players, and 2 young lawyers have been given the task to go through all this correspondence, all these text messages, all these phone messages, all these voicemails, to pick up clues to try to determine who the guilty party is, who committed the murder.
Yeah.
And the reader gets to follow along. And every once in a while, the 2 lawyers will talk to each other by text message. And they'll say, well, what did you think about that? I mean, did you pick up on that little clue that was dropped? And so as you're you're reading along, the reader gets a chance to try to solve the mystery right along with these two young lawyers.
Yeah.
The appeal refers to a fundraising drive, an appeal for money.
Mm-hmm.
That was a part of the plot. So that's
Yeah.
the significance of the title. So anyway, I thought that was just brilliantly done, and I was totally. It's not the kind of book that you would read a little bit and put it down. You got to keep up with it and just keep your reading experience propelled.
Yes. That might be a good one for me on planes when I'm stuck for like 6 hours at a time.
That's a
That
really
would be good.
good idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not a stop and start book. So my number 6 book of my top 10 is Colton Gentry's Third Act by Jeff Zentner. Now, I have spoken about this book in practically every podcast we've done since I read the book last May. Anyway, I raved about the book then, and I'm still thinking about it. It's unique because it's a really well done rom-com that's written by a man. I mean, how many male romance writers are there? I don't know of any. But anyway, he did a great job. Our main character is a country western singer, and he's got a little bit of an alcohol issue, and he disgraces himself at a performance, and he decides he's going to go home and try to find redemption in his hometown. Yeah. And the message of the book was, it's never too late to change your tune. And I loved it. I loved it.
Love that. Okay.
Okay, so
do another one.
Jump ahead one more. My number 5 book was Search by Michel Huneven. And this was a really unusual pick for me. If I had read what this book was about, I never would have picked it up. Mm-hmm. The setup is our main character is part of a search committee to pick a new minister for her church.
Yeah.
Like, okay, fine. But this is a book about group dynamics and what happens when you throw wildly diverse people into a decision-making role, and all the dynamics that occur between these people, and how are you ever going to come together to get to a good decision? Anyway, this book was definitely my biggest reading surprise of the year. And the author's description of these people who are on this committee, I mean, her descriptions were wry, insightful, great character study of the annoying differences that people have.
Yeah.
And I don't know. If the book made me want to laugh and pull my hair out at the same time. If you've ever been on a group team that had to complete a project or come to some kind of decision, and there are people who just aren't cooperating or have just wackadoodle ideas that are just like not feasible at all, I think anybody who's been through that experience would really relate to this book. And it was a big surprise to me, and I loved it.
I love that. Okay. So I have 2 that I'll mention. So I guess for me, my 4th favorite book was Sourdough by Robin Sloan.
Yes.
And, Robin writes, I think these are slightly magical realism. This is a book that takes place in San Francisco, which was done very well. The person researched the city, maybe the person, Robin, the author. I don't know if Robin has spent time there or not. But either way, this was a book basically about a woman who is an engineer, and she works for a very high-end robotics company in San Francisco, and she's extremely burnt out. And all she, and as is with the Silicon Valley area, and the Googlers, they want you to never leave, and so they have a cafeteria, and they have places like rooms you can sleep in, and they just don't ever want you to go home. And she starts to lose her passion for life. She's just coding all day, not eating anything that's healthy whatsoever. She ends up being gifted a sourdough starter from a restaurant that she had been getting takeout from, and they have to leave. The owners have to leave and move to a different country for immigration reasons. And so she's left with this sourdough starter, which is incredibly magical and has its own personality and life on its own. And her whole life changes because she starts, of course, to make bread. And we've got some great characters in this book. We also have the development and the implementation of a food hall being created in San Francisco, which as its own entity in business, I thought was fascinating to learn about. And I just enjoyed the whole thing. So it was really fun. Lessons were learned and funny characters and lots of food descriptions and just a lovely, delightful
We
read.
have got to get your brother to read this book.
He did. He recommended it to me to read.
Oh, good.
He's the one who told me about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, who knew? No, because I mean, he's really into sourdough bread, and he certainly lived the life of being the burnt out tech employee.
Yeah, coding. Yeah. Okay, so that was my fourth book. My fifth book, I've talked about this one. Stuart Turton. I believe he's British. He wrote The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which was sort of enjoyable, but I got mad at the end. And that was like a Groundhog's Day kind of type book. Anyway, this book, I can't even begin to describe the last murder at the end of the world, because it's kind of like the TV show Lost. I'll just say that. It's about an island. It's about the end of the world and the survivors that are on it. And there's a murder, and there's some science and some laboratories. And I can't go into any more details because it gives it all away. But did I love this book? No, but it kept me guessing and page turning. And I just enjoy how experimental he is with his writing style and with the way he's taking you on a story through a story, and he blends genres. This was sci-fi, this was murder mystery, a little bit of horror with the science involved in the laboratories. I mean, very interesting, cool stuff. So highly recommend just picking up one of his books and giving it a try. Yeah. All right, you take a turn.
All right. Now, I want to have a little discussion about my number 4 book,
okay,
which was The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I loved it. I mean, it almost made my top 3, and you did not like it at all. I liked it because, first of all, Liz Moore is, if I could pick like 3 authors that I will buy anything that they write, she's on that list. I just love her. She wrote Heft, which I've talked about before.
Oh, yeah.
Orbic man that's grossly overweight. She wrote, what was that book that she wrote last year about the the opioid issue that's so prevalent? Well, yeah, opioid drugs. Anyway, it was about 2 sisters. One of them is a cop and the other one's a drug addict. And that was a really, really real fun book. I'm sorry I can't remember the title of it. Why don't you look it up while I'm talking?
Tell me her name again. Sorry.
Liz Moore.
Oh, right. Okay,
anyway,
keep talking.
I thought the God of the Woods was a really well done literary thriller. In fact, I found it enthralling. And again, this is not a book that you can put down and then come back to 3 days later. You're going to lose the momentum. You're going to lose the thread of the story if you don't just stick with it and keep reading. I was able to do that. And so I didn't lose the momentum of the story. And I think that may have been what happened to you, because you said, oh, there's too many characters and where is this book going? And I think I didn't have that experience. I was really into it. A child goes missing from summer camp, and the reader finds themselves turning the pages as fast as they can. That was my experience. And the author just sends the plot going in all these different directions because there are all these characters. Any one of them seems like they might have had a motive to do away with this kid that went missing. And I really enjoyed the strong female characters. And it was kind of fascinating to see the weird family dynamics and the weird relationships that were in this one particular family. I mean, it was like watching a train wreck. It was like kind of awful, but you couldn't take your eyes away. So I just thought it was really well done on a lot of levels. It was complex.
So Liz Moore wrote Long Bright River.
Yes.
Was that the drug one? The one?
Yes, that was about two sisters. One's a cop, one's a drug addict.
Oh,
and
okay.
It was very gritty.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard topic for a lot of people. And it was, I thought, very, very well handled, very well done. Anything she writes is amazing. Oh, and she also wrote another book about a microscopic world. It was about a little girl and her dad who was a scientist.
The unseen something.
Yes, the unseen world. It's about what's there, but you don't see it. If you're looking at it through a microscope, you'll see it. But
yeah.
Anyway, Liz Moore is just a phenomenal author. I can't say enough about her. I
appreciate that she's a great writer, and I enjoyed her writing style. But or at least her descriptions, I didn't like that there's a million characters. I didn't like half of them. I didn't like any of them, really. There was a couple that I liked, and the story didn't follow them enough to keep me interested. Mm-hmm. And then I was a little disappointed about the finale and the way it ended.
Yes. A lot of people loved that, and a lot of
anticlimactic.
You'd wrap that up with a bow, and didn't like it.
Yeah, for me, it just didn't keep my attention at all. I just couldn't get into it. So maybe in the future I'll have to try again with her. But
try one of her other books. Try Heft. Heft was amazing. So you want to talk about another one before I hit my top 3?
Yeah, I will say that I'm just looking through my books here that I read, and I did enjoy reading Nightcrawling by Leila Mottley.
I haven't read that yet. Did it keep you up at night?
No, I listened to this like on Audible, and she is
scare the pants off you?
No, it's not like a horror genre. This is like what is it called? It's like literary fiction. So let me just give you the synopsis. Kiara and her brother Marcus are scraping by in an East Oakland apartment complex. Oh. They've both dropped out of school. Her mom is MIA, and actually, I think she's in jail. Anyway, she's got this little, she's got an older brother who's trying to do what he can to support her. She ends up, the main character, not adopting, but symbolically adopting the kid from next door of her apartment, because his mom is a deadbeat and completely gone, and he doesn't have any food to eat. So she starts working to take care of this child. But this whole book, I loved the author. She's also, when she wrote this book, I believe she was like 17 years old. Okay. And it became an instant bestseller, New York Times bestseller. The author, Leila, lives, I believe, in the Oakland area. And so it was, again, a book that is sort of an area that I'm familiar with. And I feel like you could tell that she is from there, and there's a lot of sense of place. But this book is about prostitution, and definitely, an underaged child prostitution. And for that reason, I didn't love this book. It was very yucky. It was very, very yucky.
It wasn't an enjoyable reading experience, but
not at all.
But it stuck with you.
It did. And I would recommend that anyone pick up work by this author, because she's incredibly talented, and especially being so young. I think there's a lot of new perspective that she gave to this topic. So yeah, I would.
Would you say the title again, because I have confused it with another title that's very similar?
Nightcrawling.
Okay, the book I
can. Another word for prostitution.
I did not realize that. Oh. The book I thought you were talking about, I believe, is called Night Walking.
Oh.
It's about a home invasion. A mother and her small child are alone in their home when somebody enters it, and they spend a very long night being terrorized, and that's
Oh my God.
I'm talking about. And I kind of want to read it, but I don't want to read it.
Oh man. Okay, let me know, what are your top 3 then, Mom?
All right, top 3, and they're all really, really good books. I recommend these 3 wholeheartedly. Number 3 is a book that I listened to as an audiobook format. It's called In an Instant by Suzanne Redfearn. And this book was so moving for me. Our main protagonist is a 16-year-old girl named Finn Miller. And she finds her life over in an instant when there's a devastating car crash, and she and 10 other people go off a cliff in a blizzard, and they end up in a ravine. Finn is killed in this crash, but she's caught between 2 worlds, between heaven and earth, if you will, watching her family and friends who are in this accident survive the experience of the accident. And then after that, to survive the grief of losing her. And she wants to help them get through, and they deal with their grief in different ways. Her sister becomes very self-destructive. Her parents are kind of being drawn apart from one another. And she wants to help before she can move on and go to whatever plane is next after, our life ends. But she can't, because she feels that she needs to help the people that she loves and left behind. Anyway, this book reminded me of a book by Alice Sebold that was written years ago called The Lovely Bones, which is also from the perspective of a young girl who was murdered, who can still look down, if you will, on the people who were left behind, trying to solve the mystery of what happened to her. Anyway, In an Instant by Suzanne Redfearn, very, very well done book. It was very poignant. I won't say I didn't cry, but I've thought about it so many times, the way people handle loss and trauma in such different ways.
Yeah.
In one family, 4 different family members handled it in vastly different ways. Anyway, very moving book. Now the next 2, I had a hard time picking number 1 and number 2. Chenneville by Paulette Jiles and Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo. It's like, which child do you love the most? I don't know. I love both these books. I'm going to say Chenneville by Paulette Jiles was number 2. And it was, interestingly enough, one of the first books I read in 2024. And it really got my reading year off to a fantastic start. Our main character is John Chenneville, and he is consumed with grief and the desire for vengeance when he returns from the Civil War and finds that his sister and her family, which consisted of her husband and an infant child, have been murdered by kind of a Wild West serial killer. Anyway, John Chenneville has had a traumatic head injury, and it's taken him quite a while to recover from it. But as soon as he's able to, he gets on a horse and takes off on this odyssey to try to find the killer of his sister's family. And it's set post Civil War in this kind of desolate frontier of the lower southwestern states. And Paulette Jiles also wrote a book called News of the World, which was made into a movie with Tom Hanks, which also was excellent. She's another person. And anything she does is amazing. But the theme of this book was vengeance, of course, and what we do to take revenge on someone who took a loved one away from you. But it's left me pondering, even though your revenge might be justifiable, is it worth the toll that it will take on you?
The burden of carrying that, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that book, I've thought about that quite a lot since I read it. And number one, I finally had to choose Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo. This book was pretty popular. It was pretty strongly hyped. She's written a couple of other things that have also been very well received. I've seen a couple of author interviews with her, and she looks like she's in her maybe early 30s. Anyway, she's quite a delightful young woman, and I'm looking forward to a lot more from her. So anyway, this book hit me like a ton of bricks and has stayed with me ever since I read it. This was another book I read in the spring, and it's about our main character. Julia is a very complicated individual, and she quite frequently commits acts of self-sabotage that ruin her relationships with people that she's close to.
Yes.
And we follow her story over several decades. And as she gets second chances for do-overs, she'll meet people that she's been estranged from and have a chance to, try to mend fences and get back that friendship that she once enjoyed. And she was a very frustrating character to read about. You just want to take her by the neck and throttle her and say, don't you see what you're doing? You're ruining your life. It just seemed all too real, which was the other thing, because we've all met people who do that, who make really bad choices in their relationships. Anyway, the book was a story about relationships and how they begin and how they end, and most importantly, how they last, what makes a long relationship. And I loved this book, and I've thought about it a lot. A lot of the things that the author brings to the forefront were really, really thoughtful and meaningful. So anyway, that ended up being number one because I think it had the most impact on me of all the authors that I read.
I love that. For both of those books, there was there's a lot of grief. Do you think, like, in both of those two books that you mentioned?
Both of those books, Chenneville by Paulette, Jiles, and Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo, vastly different. I mean, one of them was historical fiction, one of them was more contemporary. They both had to do with personal choices that the main character makes that left me thinking, was that the right thing to do?
That's what I mean, like grieving over choices you've made or relationships lost.
Yeah.
So,
and Julia in Same as It Ever Was not a particularly likable character. I was more exasperated with her than I was rooting for her. It was more the theme that the author was bringing forth, made me question a lot of relationships that I've had or decisions that I've made within relationships.
Yeah.
And if you could have a do-over, would you? Maybe. I don't know. But with John Chenneville, I was rooting for him every second of the way. I wanted him to find a good life. I wanted him to not be revengeful. I wanted him to find happiness and not have just killing this evil person the main accomplishment that he had in his life. And I don't want to say how the book ends, but I was satisfied with the way that it got wrapped up. Anyway, both really, really good books. So I think it was a good reading year for me. I was quite surprised because I think I rate books high. I think I'm a high grader. And I had a lot of books that I rated 4 stars. But I must have had a lot of books that I didn't like, which meant that I chose poorly, I think. Because if I had a lot of ratings that were I had a few 1-star, a number of 2-star, a lot of 3-star, which caused my average rating for books for 2024 to be 3.5.
Yeah, mine is
that I would have more, that it would be leaning more toward 4-star, because that means that I enjoyed most of the books that I read.
For me, I discovered through the year that I actually enjoy reading about Greek mythology, which is a surprise for me. I read 2 Jennifer Saint books this year, Electra and Atalanta. I did not really enjoy Electra at all, but I don't think that's Jennifer's fault. I just, you're retelling these stories that have been around for quite a long time. So I should have known better by choosing the story. But Atalanta was a lovely, fascinating book. And really, it was just, living in a forest. And then the other half of the book is living on a ship. And just the romance and the life that Atalanta had. So I didn't think I would enjoy reading about these stories, and a lot of the other characters from Greek mythology, of course, are have little cameos in this, which makes me want to read more. I did actually pick up Song of Achilles, who is not written by Jennifer Saint, but somebody else. Yes. And I did not care for that. But also, I don't think that's Madeline's fault. I think it's just there was a male teenage romance that just was not interesting to me. But anyway, so that was a surprise. Greek mythology.
I highly recommend that you read Clytemnestra.
Yes, because she is Electra's mother.
She is. And this is another revenge tale. And believe me, she had reasons.
She did. And she did a hell of a job. Anyway.
I haven't read is Stone Mind, which is the story of Medusa. And Medusa is characterized in a much more sympathetic manner.
That's by Natalie Hayes.
Probably, yeah.
It is. I do want to read that. Yeah, that would be interesting.
There's more for you.
There you go. I would say that my theme for the year definitely was I wanted to be entertained and taken away to somewhere else where I was, definitely escapism. Yeah. I didn't mention any books that I read, but about from what's her name? TJ Kingfisher? Hang on. Anyway, she writes fairy tales, basically.
Oh, right. Yeah.
TK, sorry, I'm trying to go through Goodreads real quickly. T. Kingfisher, she wrote Nettle and Bone, and I do adore and love her books and read quite a few of them this year. They didn't make it into my top 10 list here, but highly recommend her
books too. And I think they were really, really good. I mean, I'd say they're fantasy, right?
Like dark fairy tale.
Yeah, yeah.
But great characterizations.
Yes, yes.
So let's transition and talk a little bit about what we're going to read in 2025 and what your thoughts are there.
I want to read more books that I actually own.
Yeah. Okay, fair.
Because there's this real trend, almost every 75-80% of the books that I read in 2024, I purchased in 2024, and they were it published, in that year or in 2023. And there's nothing wrong with going back and reading books that were popular 5 years ago, 10 years ago. 2 books that I reread that I just want to mention. I reread Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, which is a Western. Absolutely loved it. I think I liked it better even. I mean,
wow.
I loved it when I read it in 1980, whatever, but it was just as magnificent a story. And the other book that I reread was Rules of Civility by Amor Towles.
Yeah.
He wrote A Gentleman from Moscow.
Your favorite.
Yeah. The Lincoln Highway. I love that man. I really do. I wonder if he's married. his wife
He is.
out. No, he's an amazing author. So anyway, I reread both those books, and they both were just as good, if not better, as they were the first time.
I had, like I told you, I had an epiphany the other night about the books that I would like to read in 2025. And for me, I realize I have not read a lot of classic American authors like Stephen King. I ended this year, my very last book of 2024 was reading a P.D. James book. I've always avoided, I don't like to read these best-selling big-time authors, these James Patterson types, because I never buy into the hype. I'm always let down. I don't love these books like the masses do.
The commercialism around the certain authors that, like Erin Hildebrand, for instance. I just don't want to go there because I hear so much about her books. I mean, maybe they're great. I don't know, but
what I've realized is, though, I'm very biased by these hyped up authors. I don't want to read Stephen King because it's just, he doesn't write stuff that I would like. Yes, of course he does. He doesn't write just horror, or he writes fantasy. He writes all sorts of things. And another, P.D. James, I thought she was a man. She's passed, but she wrote Death Comes to Pemberley, which is kind of a sequel to Pride and Prejudice. And it was great. And it was actually a courtroom drama. So
you know what? I challenge us to do what we just said we wanted to do for upcoming reading year.
Yeah, let's do that.
I would love to see you read some Stephen King, and I would love to see you read books that are way backlist. And I would love to have you suggest to me books that were published like before 2020.
I agree. I hate to say this but I can't not. I need to, because I have some author interviews planned for this year. So I am going to read some new 2025 fiction and some debut authors. But I would like to focus on some of these more modern classics that have been established and by some really powerful, great authors, so that I can appreciate them.
I think that's an admirable goal, and good for you. And I am really going to try. I've already started making lists of books that I have on my physical TBR that are on my bookshelves. And my Kindle is just a ridiculous state of affairs. I just buy these books on Kindle or borrow them from Kindle Unlimited, and they just sit in this limbo land. And I am determined I am going to start cracking through those titles. And next year, when we do this podcast again, I want to be able to say that I read a much bigger percentage of books that I actually already own.
I agree. I think there's a bit of a frugal trend happening, at least, especially for me. I don't want to spend so much money on books. I have plenty in our shared Kindle library. Plus, I love all of these apps now. The Libby app, of course, is a big favorite. There's the Pango app where you can buy and use, sell books and get credits. So I'm also going to challenge us to purchase less and to borrow more for the year.
All right. Well, those are good challenges.
Yes. Let's see what we do. Anything else?
No. I think, we've gone on for an hour now talking about our favorite books and what direction our reading took last year and the direction we hope to see it go for the following year. So I think we have a lot to think about.
I do.
I'm going to go back to my lists and start highlighting, making priorities, what's up next.
Yeah, I love that. So what I'll do for everyone listening or watching, I will put in the description the list of all of the books that we mentioned. So Mom, if you could actually send me those 10, if you have them written down, send them to me. And I'll make sure that we are able to share that for everybody who, if there was a book that you didn't read but wanted to pick up, you can. So and with that, I wish everybody a happy new year. Thanks for being with us. Yeah, thanks, Mom.
Thank you.